Dear participants, I'm Kevin McKinley. I regret I couldn't be with you today. I'm the Acting Secretary General of ISO, and I'm pleased to address you today about standards and their importance to industry. What is a standard? And standards provide specifications, requirements, or guidelines that help to ensure materials, products, processes, and services are fit for their purpose. The word standard is used with many different meanings by different organizations. In ISO, we have a definition in our Guide 2. We define a standard to be a document established by consensus and approved by a recognized body that provides for common and repeated use. Rules, guidelines, or characteristics for activities or their results aimed at achieving the optimum degree of order in a given context. It's also important to recall the definition used by key organizations such as the World Trade Organization and in the framework of their Technical Barriers to Trade Agreement, TBT. It's very similar to the ISO definition. The main difference is an additional key clarification. Standards are voluntary, as opposed to technical regulations, which are mandatory. So what are the differences between standards and technical regulations? Public authorities can decide that standards, being voluntary, covering certain areas, could be made mandatory for legitimate objectives. These include health, safety, environmental protection. Some examples include food safety, health protection, fire prevention, firefighting, transportation of dangerous goods, and the safety of gas and electrical appliances. In those cases, we say that standards are transformed, or more correctly incorporated into technical regulations. There are a lot of specific issues to be addressed in this area, the relationship between standards and regulations, but this goes beyond the scope of what I can get into today. But how do these standards relate to regulations and to trade? Briefly, ISO, being a leader in developing international standards, has 162 national standards bodies, one per country, and is multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder, and based on a principle of national representation. Each national body is responsible for identifying and involving the interested and affected parties in its work to develop standards. This allows to express a double level of consensus among stakeholders and across countries. ISO's procedures, as well as the organization's code of ethics and strategic plan, ensure that ISO adheres to established principles for the development of international standards: openness, transparency, impartiality and consensus, effectiveness and relevance, coherence, and the development dimension. These 6 principles make up the core expectations of the World Trade Organization's Technical Barriers to Trade Committee for the development as principles for the development of international standards. Why do we need standards? If we limit our perspective just to modern technical standards, which date back to the advent of the metric system of units around the end of the 18th century, and to the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, standards are a result of a 200-year effort under the Industrial Revolution, where standards codified the result of efforts made by scientists and engineers, providing the foundation for the design, manufacturing, and operation of almost all the products and infrastructures surrounding us today: roads, bridges, railways, ports, water, and electrical. These standards ensure reliability, interchangeability, interoperability, and they codify characteristics of products, materials, structures, and organizations, and processes. They provide objective criteria to assess health, safety, and environmental requirements. And from an economic perspective, standards are instruments that contribute to public welfare by improving market efficiency, dealing with market failures, and facilitating trade. The benefits of standards can be quantified from a macroeconomic perspective, with a number of national studies that have demonstrated the positive impact of standards on growth, productivity, and the trade balances of countries. And at a microeconomic level, we have developed an ISO methodology to measure the benefits of using standards from a company's perspective. The studies have revealed the following 3 important benefits of using standards. Firstly, efficiency. By reducing the time needed to perform specific activities, decreasing waste, reducing procurement costs, and increasing productivity. The case studies consistently reported the contribution of standards to the gross profit of companies ranging between 0.15% and 5% of their annual revenues. Secondly, innovation. The studies also revealed clear examples where standards served as the basis for innovating business processes, allowing companies to expand their supplier network or introduce new products or services. Access to new markets is the third advantage, and in some cases standards provide the basis for developing new products, penetrating new markets, both domestic and export markets, supporting uptake in the markets of their products, and even creating new markets. And even in exceptional cases, the impact of standards far exceed the figures I previously mentioned, with some companies achieving a gross profit contribution of up to 33% of their annual revenues. I wish you a fruitful discussion at your conference today. Thank you.